Lee Curtis, stalked and romanced by serial killer Ron Silver in Blue Steel. Two groups of boys compete for survival on a remote island in Lord of the Flies. And a pair of crooks are forced to go undercover as nuns on the run. It's all coming up next on Siskel and Ebert.
You know, like this.
Jamie Lee Curtis is a rookie cop in trouble on and off the job in the thriller called Blue Steel. It's one of 5 new films we'll be reviewing this week on Siskel and Ebert. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. The name of our first movie is Blue Steel, and it stars Jamie Lee Curtis in a more subtle and psychologically complicated version of Halloween, the movie that made her a star in the first place. The premise is basically the same. Curtis is the target of an unstoppable madman killer who just keeps right on coming. But the situation has overtones of fatal attraction to it because this is a man Curtis has briefly been in love with. They meet in a strange way. It's Curtis's first day on the job as a New York cop, and she kills a stick-up man in a grocery store. Ron Silver plays one of the customers in the store, and when he witnesses the killing, something comes unglued inside of him. Here it is, the basic scene in all cop movies. The wrong-headed investigator automatically assumes the heroic cop is irresponsible.
What are you drawing you?
Looked like a 44.
Why didn't you just tackle him?
Because he was 40 feet away.
So then how could you tell if it was a 44?
Because I could.
You mind? No gun found at the scene, Officer Turner. Nothing on the victim.
I know.
Even though Blue Steel is a thriller, it has some nice moments of dry humor in it, like this one.
You're a good-looking woman. I mean, beautiful, in fact. Why would you want to become a cop?
I like to slam people's heads up against walls.
And it has the usual obligatory thriller scenes, like when everything is nice and quiet right before it gets scary.
Tracy, just do me one favor, okay? For the rest of my life, just one. Don't set me up.
He's a nice guy.
Give me a break, Tracy. So is the other guy.
Just remember, the little baby is all fine.
And you know, as often as I see those scenes in the movies where somebody jumps out of the shadows, I still jump too, just like a little robot. I just can't help myself. Thank you very much. Blue Steel is almost like an anthology of the best parts from several other recent thrillers. It has the killer who will not die, and the fatal attraction to a dangerous lover, and the cop who can't convince anybody that she knows who the killer is. Jamie Lee Curtis is right for a role like this. She seems tough and smart, and Ron Silver is a thoroughly demented killer. What a difference this is from his role in Enemies: A Love Story, or also in this month's HBO movie, Fellow Traveler. This is a completely different character, a madman who is slick enough to convince everyone he's simply what he appears to be, a respectable commodities trader. This is a thriller that works.
I don't think it works at all.
No?
Except for the setup of the picture where we see that she is under pressure as a rookie cop. The film sets that up just like Serpico did with Al Pacino wandering on the street there for his first case. And I felt the danger she feels. But then I thought the film was absolutely preposterous. We don't really understand why he becomes a psycho, if in fact he hasn't been one already before. I think that she, being a good cop, which is the way she's presented, would spot that this guy was a weirdball real quickly. I don't think he is particularly attractive so that they would get involved. The commanding officer, they sort of figured out the story a lot easier. It borders on idiot plot, really.
Gene,
no,
haven't you ever seen a movie like this before? Don't you know what the conventions of this genre are?
I usually don't like them when I see them
This is not a realistic, psychologically profound police procedural like Serpico. This is a thriller. It is about a madman killer. Yes. It is about how she gets involved and how she has to get herself uninvolved and protect herself. What do you mean we don't know how he got to be a psycho?
No.
I mean,
it's
assumed. It's assumed. You see him there in the grocery store. He picks up the gun. The next time you see him, he's nuts. What do we need? A psychiatrist to come in?
It would be more interesting if they did tell it, but also I don't think it's an idiot plot, like you've often said. If we find out one thing, which is that the guy is not what he appears to be, anyone should be able to pick that up.
But no, that's not true, because after she finds out he's not what he appears to be, she can't convince anyone because he's so good at fooling them.
I don't think he's that good. The other time, you're now explaining to me the story rather than telling me how good it was. And I don't think it's
scared me. It worked. I was involved with her. I was involved with her situation, and I was frightened by the scary parts.
I wasn't frightened by the scary parts. I laughed at the film. The only thing that's a bit interesting is the sight of Jamie Lee Curtis in a police uniform, which they play to the hilt. I don't think it's a good picture at all. Our next film is yet another film version of William Golding's famous novel, Lord of the Flies, about how shipwrecked British school children turn on each other on a deserted island, destroying themselves in the same way that adult society seems destined to do with politics and warfare. The problem with this more modern American version of the book is that it doesn't add anything to the truly fine 1963 film version of the story, so we sit there watching and constantly ask ourselves, why was this film made? On the island, the 24 boys quickly begin arguing about how they should organize themselves to be rescued.
We should set up some kind of steady signal, like a fire.
Sir, are you the leader? Jack's the oldest.
Who else the colonel?
I think it should be Ralph. Ralph.
Yeah, he's the colonel.
I vote for Ralph. Yeah, Ralph.
He's the colonel. Ralph. I guess she just won the election.
The boys soon divide into two groups, the ones who want to remain organized and civilized and tend to their signal fire, and those who become the more naturalistic hunters, viewing their plight as a lark.
If you guys had let the fire go out, they would have seen it. Hey, man, we were hunting. We could have been rescued. Back off, man. I'm sick and so's my gang. Your gang? What's that supposed to mean? What it means, Colonel, is that if you know what's good for you, you'll stop trying to run everything.
There is a constant push-pull between the two groups, between two sides of the human animal.
We've got to be one group again. I agree. You can join my camp and have all the meat you want.
Now, all by itself, this movie is okay, although by making the time of the story today and making the boys American, you might think that the kids would be smarter than they act. After all, they would most likely have read the book, The Lord of the Flies, at their military school, and they would know, hey, you know, we're in a dangerous situation. Those kids in Lord of the Flies destroyed themselves. We won't do it. But again, my overriding reaction to this movie is that it was an absolutely needless piece of movie making. Peter Brook, a fine director on stage and film, directed a compelling black and white version of this story in 1963. That's only 27 years ago. Are we so cynical about today's moviegoers that we don't think they will even rent that film at video stores? Well, they may not now. This new version helps kill interest in the old version, and that makes me angry.
Well, I am so cynical that I believe they won't rent the film made in 1963, and I'm cynical enough to believe that most video stores don't carry it either. In fact, I think that young people today have really lost a lot of sense of what happened before, let's say, Indiana Jones came out. But apart from that, I agree with you, there's absolutely no need to remake this film. In fact, by making it today and making it American kids, in a way, you lose almost the point of the original novel, which was about these very proper British private school kids who get involved in this situation where the veneer of civilization is stripped aside. Right. The tragedy in our society today, here and in England, is that that veneer of civilization has been stripped aside. The presumption in this movie is that most people are like Ralph, the good guy, the liberal humanist, and not like Jack, the bad guy who's into violence and brute force. But if you look in the streets of our cities today, you'll find that among kids there are a lot of Jacks and not enough Ralphs. And so the movie doesn't make, it's not as surprising as it was when the novel was first written.
I also think that by making it present day, that the picture doesn't really stand for anything. In other words, when I saw the '63 version, it had, in black and white, it had a mythic quality to it. It was representational, just like, you know, the story is trying to make a point. Here, it just sort of becomes like a TV movie of the week. It has that kind of feel to it.
Yeah, you know, the real reason I suspect why this movie was made is because the man who was the executive producer of it owned the rights to the novel, and he made it once, and he thought, gee, I still own it, I'll make it again. And that's not a good enough reason.
Just trying to cash in.
When we come back, Nuns on the Run as two London crooks disguise themselves to hide from some killers.
Excuse me?
Do nuns usually wear makeup?
It's our day off.
The movie is named Nuns on the Run, and it stars Eric Idle of Monty Python fame and another British comedian named Robbie Coltrane as two low-level London crooks who stumble into a lot of loot but are being chased by two different sets of bad guys. Their troubles begin when they steal 2 bags full of money from a gang of drug dealers.
Lion, they're gonna kill you!
Go away.
I won't let it happen. Come with
Go
me.
home.
Come with me.
Let go of me. I'm trying to commit a major crime. Is this part of the plan?
Where can they hide? They dodge into a nearby convent, grab some habits from the laundry room, and try to pass themselves off as nuns.
You'll never get away with this.
Brian, this is our only chance to go straight.
You call this going straight?
And, of course, there are the usual jokes involving high life behind the convent walls.
Let's pay! Got any booze?
Nuns on the Run is the kind of movie that isn't funny unless you, for some reason, think that nuns are intrinsically funny, and I don't, so I guess I don't get the joke of this movie. Humor does not consist of putting on costumes and looking ridiculous in them for long stretches of time. It also involves imagination and originality, and those are things that this movie does not possess. It's basically on the level of the old Bowery Boys comedies where a couple of buffoons run away from a gang of dunces and look funny the whole time. I found it to be a very, very long movie.
I think they only had the one visual joke, and we saw it one time when the men dressed as nuns run across in a long shot. They're like a gangplank, sort of, a stairway. And so some people might think, oh, it's a funny visual thing to see men dressed as nuns running with the habits flowing in the back. That's all that the picture is about. It's like that was the story conference, and then they tried to come up with some jokes to justify doing the thing, and they didn't come up with anything funny. I was startled. I'm waiting to laugh. It had nothing interesting to say about anything.
You're absolutely right. What about the portrait of the convent? Now, is there something funny that can be said about a convent? I suppose so.
Of course there can.
You can find
humor in anything.
Quirky eccentricities, and you enjoy that, or you exploit that in some way or another, but not the same old cliched characters from beginning to end. There's nothing in this movie at all that's original.
No.
Once you've heard the title,
right, you've got
the best part of the movie.
That's enough, and there's no point in wasting any more time on it. Coming up next, Brian Dennehy leads a small band of old-fashioned cops in a battle against a major drug conspiracy in The Last of the Finest.
Now, up until a few years ago, this guy's strictly small potatoes, a nickel bag hustler. Now, all of a sudden, he's playing in the big leagues.
And it's a strange movie only because it takes so long to tell such a predictable story, the story of a cop with old-fashioned values fighting a worldwide drug conspiracy. Brian Dennehy plays the detective hero here, who, along with his partners, begin tracking a gang of drug dealers. The bad guys get away, and Dennehy is pressured by his boss to cool it.
Look, Frank, your medical report came back. They say you're borderline. But I'd say you're slipping over the edge, I mean.
Well, that's where we live.
We're cops, Joe. Remember?
And yes, there's a big shootout at the end, but not before Dennehy confronts his foes and colleagues who are on the take from the drug dealers.
Kill him.
Come on, Frank!
No!
The Last of the Finest is elaborate enough to show a whole network of corruption involving businessmen and high-ranking politicians, as well as law enforcement officials, but the movie hardly seems real. The dialogue is stilted. Maybe you're slipping over the edge. That's the way we live. We're cops, remember? Of course he remembers. I mean, that's phony material. And the story plays out like an overlong first draft before repetitive scenes have been removed. I don't think this would even work as a made-for-TV movie.
I was disappointed, too. And, you know, the movie was directed by John McKenzie, the same man who made The Long Good Friday, which was a very good film. This one, I put my finger on the same thing. There were a lot of scenes in this movie that don't pay off, that have no apparent purpose, and that seem to repeat the same material over and over so that it isn't wound up and stretched tight from beginning to end.
Yeah.
The other part of the movie has. Now, oddly enough, it's a rarity among cop movies in that the cops are liberals and the bad guys are conservatives who are trying to support the Contras in Nicaragua. They don't mention the country, but it's obviously a Contra support group. The irony there, of course, is that the recent victory of the Contras in Nicaragua and the capitulation of the Sandinistas changes the whole context within which we view that struggle, so that the politics are really doubly murky in this film.
But to have that level of political discussion in what is otherwise a routine cop drug picture the picture's completely confused and it's like it's slow.
I mean, I found it interesting that Brian Dennehy was a liberal who, and I also find it interesting that they're tempted to keep the money, that they're tempted to kill a cop, that they're tempted to break the law, and they have to decide those issues for themselves. There's interesting material here. It just isn't paid off very well.
It's a movie almost that is written in slow motion, if that concept means anything. When we come back, Black Rain. No, not the Michael Douglas thriller, but a new drama from Japan.
Is named Black Rain, and the title is likely to lead to some confusion, especially since it's one of two recent movies of the same name that were both filmed in Japan. This one is not the thriller starring Michael Douglas, but a new film by Shohei Imamura, who was one of the very best of all Japanese directors. His film, Vengeance is Mine, is one of the best films we've seen, I think, in the last 15 years. The movie confronts with great pain and honesty the most traumatic memory in Japan's national consciousness, the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. The film begins on an ordinary wartime day in a village not far from the city. The atomic bomb has just exploded, and with fearsome attention to detail, Imamura shows the shocked villagers reacting to the event. The black rain that falls is filled with radiation, and 5 years later, those who have been affected with it are shunned by the healthy. Yasuko, the heroine of the movie, has a medical certificate that claims she's healthy, but she's shunned because she was exposed to the black rain. In status-conscious Japanese society, an unmarried daughter is a terrible thing. That makes it doubly hard for Yasuko to ever overcome the prejudice of others against those like yourself who may have radiation poisoning. The subtitles look kind of lousy in that TV clip, but when I saw the movie in a theater on a big screen, they were completely legible, so don't hold what you saw here against it. Black Rain is a very, very Japanese film in this respect. It's not about the bomb so much, even about who dropped the bomb or why the bomb was dropped, as about the effect the bomb had on the ancient traditions of Japanese society. As we meet the people who live in that village, we begin to understand how their society is determined by traditions, by status, by the marriageability of young people. And we see that the radiation has poisoned some of their bodies, but all of their attitudes. In a way, the victims of radiation are treated here as if it's their own fault. Diseases like TB and cancer and AIDS have also been regarded that way over the years, and Black Rain is one of the most intelligent, powerful movies I've ever seen about what Susan Sontag calls illness as metaphor.
Well, you're right. It wouldn't be very interesting or controversial for a fine Japanese filmmaker like Imamura to make a film that said dropping the bomb on us was a horrible thing. That's an easy one. So he takes the much more provocative issue, which is, all right, from the literal fallout, what did we do to ourselves? And in this respect, the Japanese didn't handle the problem very well. They turned on each other. And we see that also in terms of AIDS, of scapegoating, and all, rather than problem solving, which is obviously the more healthy way to handle the problem. And I also enjoyed, just in his visual strategy, looking at it as a film, aside from the issue, these horrible things are going on in some of the most beautiful settings on the planet. And you have, you know, beautiful flowering trees and a family in abject crisis because of what they're afraid of is being said about them and their daughter.
Imamura has been an outsider in the Japanese cinema ever since he first started his career. He does not make genre films, which the Japanese like so much that about 95% of their movies exist in established genres. He makes movies that are critical of Japanese society, and this is certainly one of his most powerful ones, because what he's saying here, as you just pointed out, and as for that matter, as I just pointed out, is that the story begins after the bomb is dropped with what do you do then, and he doesn't believe that what the Japanese did at that point with the unmistakable reality of the bomb was very good.
Okay, now let's recap the movies we reviewed on this show. A split decision on Blue Steel. Roger enjoyed the thriller aspects of the Jamie Lee Curtis film. I found the whole story involving Ron Silver as a serial killer to be utterly preposterous. His thumb up, mine down. 2 thumbs down for the needless remake of Lord of the Flies, a story that really loses its importance and its drama when it's updated to present-day American children. 2 thumbs down for Nuns on the Run, a brainless would-be comedy that overplays its one thin idea of men in nuns' clothing. 2 more thumbs down for the overlong, slow-moving, and underwritten cop thriller The Last of the Finest with Brian Dennehy. Finally, 2 thumbs up for Black Rain by director Shohei Imamura, a tragic story of Japanese discrimination by the Japanese. So Black Rain is the one film that is the class of this group.
And to help people find it, it's moving out slowly through major markets and then through secondary markets over the next couple of months. It's the only Black Rain now in theaters. I think the Michael Douglas picture is going to video, so...
And it's the only Black Rain picture that I recommend. I wasn't a fan of the Douglas thriller.
Okay, that's it for this week. Next week we'll be back with Pretty Woman, an offbeat romance starring Richard Gere and Julia Roberts, an Oscar nominee. And Shock to the System, starring Michael Caine and Elizabeth McGovern, in the story of a man who believes that crime does pay. That's next week, and until then, the balcony is closed.
You can win a submarine in the Nestle Crunch Hunt for Red October sweepstakes. And watch for the major motion picture starring Sean Connery and Alec Baldwin. Super 8 motels with over 700 locations nationwide, and the American Express card welcomed at all of them. Don't leave home without it. Magla ironing board cover and pad sets feature heat-resistant coating and attractive designs from Magla Home Helpers. It's America's favorite jelly bean, Jelly Belly, now appearing at theaters and specialty stores with good taste. Jelly Belly beans. Try them. You'll love them.